Right, so this is a suggestion via a donation. The name of the video is Why Africa is Doomed to Stay Poor. Guys, that is a crazy title. I mean, obviously there are like pockets in Africa that are absolutely not impoverished, guys. Absolutely. Rivaling some of the best cities we can encounter in terms of like quality of life, mainly, right? There are a lot of outside influences that have been affecting Africa for a very long time. Very, very long time, guys, right? I think those are the same things as those, for example, those same influences are the reason why Haiti is so poor, right? But all right, let's go and check out. Let's see where this takes us, guys.
Within the interior of East Africa resides the small but beautiful nation of Uganda.
Okay. Yeah,
However,
Uganda is gorgeous, guys.
And has been for a long
seriously, Uganda is gorgeous.
Time been a poor country. This has largely been attributed to major political instability since it gained its independence in 1962.
Bro, they made a movie about that, man, The Last King of Scotland. Have fun. Get ready to have your mind blown, guys.
Despite this, the country has been long speculated to be poised for rapid economic and development growth on account of its significant natural resource deposits, abundant fertile agricultural land, and large working age population. But like all developing nations, Uganda has been in need of significant monetary investment to aid in the development of heavy industry, increase public utilities, and scale up infrastructure to meet the demands of a growing economy and population.
And they have unfortunately brought in a lot of Chinese, right? And they, not specifically speaking about it in like a degrading manner, but like they have brought in a lot of China, guys, all right? And way too much China. And what I mean by that is that that's not going to be a good look in the future. They're obviously setting up mainly China. China is trying to set themselves up to be one of the most powerful nations in existence by literally infiltrating Africa the way they have been, guys. It's not just that Europe has absolutely obliterated Africa for a very long time, but now China's coming in and they're like, yeah, all right, I want some of this too, basically. And that's what's happening right now in the majority of Africa. Uganda is definitely poised to be probably more powerful than Nigeria. Probably in the next 50 years, guys. Uganda is coming up fast. That's a really good place to invest right now, though. I will say, all right, Uganda and Kenya, look at them on the like all the economic charts, guys. Look at them. You're gonna be like, okay, wait, hold on. Something is happening. Something is definitely happening. Like, there's a gigantic tech sector out there, guys. It's wild.
This is why Uganda laid out an aggressive 20-year-long civil aviation master plan to dramatically upgrade the country's overburdened and only international airport, Entebbe. Located 40 miles southwest of the capital, the goal of the project was to make the airport a regional hub, something particularly important for a landlocked country. Then, in 2015, the nation started looking for potential loan suppliers in order to obtain the mountains of capital needed for such an ambitious project. They found their supplier in the Chinese National Export-Import Bank of Exim.
And guys, they definitely have all the natural resources to fund this. Keep that in mind. If the African Union very specifically was to kind of like funnel funds to a very specific place, you did not need to go to China, bro. All right, I'm telling you, you did not need to go to China for this. You could have just borrowed from the African Union, period. All right, but all right, let's get it.
The $207 million 20-year-long contract secured the funding to begin construction. At face value, this seems like a perfectly normal and mutually beneficial deal, but it underpins a much larger and insidious scheme by the Chinese Communist Party to become a superpower.
Guys, I'm glad you're saying it, because listen, for a second I thought I was a terrible person for pointing out the obvious, guys, but I'm glad someone else is saying it. All right, so blame him, not me.
With construction at Entebbe well underway, things were going smoothly. However, the situation soured when the Ugandan Civil Aviation Authority started to look at the fine details of the hastily agreed upon contract, discovering some 13 separate clauses that were deemed unfriendly or toxic. including measures that essentially mortgaged out the airport, with all channels for mediation to be conducted through Chinese courts, and gave China the ability to approve and veto budgets. All this means is that China is in the driver's seat of the current contract and in control of any modifications to that contract in the future. Under pressure from China to make a deal quickly, Ugandan leaders either failed to identify these toxic clauses or decided to take a risk.
Guys, let me tell you something really quickly I've heard one time, guys. If you are like a deeply melanated individual, specifically from the United States of America, you know that there's kind of always a group of people in your neighborhoods, in your areas, specifically if you're from an area that is majority deeply melanated. There's a group of people in your area that exclusively sell but never hire, if that makes any sense. There's always like a very specific, listen, I'm not trying to be one of those guys, all right? I'm just pointing out the literal obvious. I'm saying kind of the quiet parts out loud here. There's a very specific group of people from a country, right? That they're all in a very specific area while people are underserved. They serve their community, but literally never hire any of them. Meaning, all they're doing is wealth extraction, if that makes any sense. When you look at, and I mean, just in these areas, okay? Outside, maybe things may be different or whatever it is, but like in these deeply melanated communities in the United States of America, when it comes to like beauty supply stores, right, and restaurants mainly, you'll start to notice that for some reason, it's almost like there are classes that are taught in some region of the planet, specifically, how to deal with a group of people and how to remove money from the areas. If that makes any sense. You get a whole lot of money if you go right there. Go there. Oh, all right, but that's it. Let's continue.
Nevertheless, things started to erode in 2020 with the global economic crash, which crippled Uganda's financial situation. In a desperate attempt to renegotiate the contract in early 2021, the Chinese bank rejected. By late 2021, it's been rumored that Uganda has found itself unable to make payments, which triggered a takeover of the airport by China in November. While the full situation and extent of the issue is currently unknown, since both nations are trying to keep things quiet, a total takeover of the airport would not, however, be a surprising thing to occur. In fact, China, over the last decade, has seized many valuable infrastructure assets of developing countries on the back of its Belt and Road Initiative.
Bruh.
Hailed as the
Guys, they should have brought some Black Americans over to give you guys some knowledge a little bit, guys. Be careful. All right.
Project of the century by Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Easily the worst thing you could have possibly done to
expand
a lot of these developing nations. Easily the worst thing, the worst deals you could have made.
Global infrastructure with itself as the economic center, cementing China as a global superpower. Covering 65% of the world's total population in 140 countries, China has enticed specifically developing countries with massive loans for desperately needed infrastructure projects totaling $500 billion so far. To put that mind-boggling figure into some perspective, under the Marshall Plan, the US spent $135 billion adjusted for inflation to help rebuild Western Europe after World War II, over 4 times less than the Belt and Road Initiative to date. However, a good portion of these loans to low-income countries are unlikely to be paid off, as it appears China does not assess the nation's ability to pay back the loan. When these defaults eventually occur, the recipient country is then forced to release assets to China, either the project itself like Entebbe, or some sort of other agreement that China agrees upon.
How does this sound like wealth extraction? Again, guys, why does it sound like that? feels like a trend.
In fact, in 2019, Uganda's southern neighbor Kenya almost forfeited the port of Mombasa, the largest port in Africa and by far the most important piece of economic infrastructure in the country.
Right.
However, in saving the port, Kenya is now overburdened by a mountain of Chinese debt, costing the nation over 40% of all tax revenue to make payments. One such country that did end up losing its port was Sri Lanka, who now has to lease out the port to China for the next 99 years. Not only is this a major blow to Sri Lanka's economy and sovereignty, but it also has sparked fears that China might use the port as a naval base a mere 200 miles from its geopolitical rival, India. A similar situation occurred in Djibouti, giving China a forward naval base along the most important economic shipping lane in the world. Laos, who has let external debts get out of hand, will now be forced to cede a majority stake in the national power grid, effectively putting a political stranglehold on the nation. With huge fixtures of these economies being in control by the Chinese government, the developing countries become heavily influenced, if not financially subservient to Beijing. If China owns your only major shipping port, who do you think you'll have to trade with? This is called debt trap diplomacy, and the motivation to utilize it ultimately stems from China's current economic conundrum. See, China has experienced unbelievable growth and industrialization in the last 40 years. However, that growth is largely attributed to the vast availability of very cheap labor. As wealth and productivity have steadily increased, that labor is slowly becoming less affordable and less competitive on the global stage, and it's starting to affect China's growth. This is called the middle income trap, of which countries such as Brazil and South Africa have experienced, ultimately stagnating their economic growth. But China has seen this coming for some time, and they have aspirations to become a superpower. Their strategy, which is enabled through the Belt and Road Initiative, is to relocate wealth generation and cheap labor to low-income countries, specifically in Africa, while transferring the domestic market to more complex industrial manufacturing and services, essentially making Africa China's new China. With Africa poised to undergo dramatic economic growth in the 21st century, akin to Asia's in the 20th, and an explosion of population to 3.8 billion by 2100, Africa will then become the world's new source for cheap labor, and China wants to be the main beneficiary of this economic boom. By utilizing debt trap diplomacy now, China can gain access and possession of critical and increasingly valuable pieces of economic infrastructure in Asia and elsewhere. But the 2020 financial crash changed everything. China has pivoted rather abruptly, with a decreasing desire to unload massive amounts of capital abroad due to its own domestic fears of financial meltdown, including the possibility of its largest property holder Evergrande defaulting. This has caused China's foreign direct investment to slow down even more than it already was.
That's amazing.
This is having a ripple effect across the world, and Africa is hit especially hard.
Here's the thing, guys. Listen, the only way I can see like Africa moving forward, like I mean, as an entire continent here, guys, the only way I can see it moving forward is if they did it themselves. I think obviously it's too late with the amount of debt that's being, accrued. But like the only way to do anything, like even in reality, guys, do it yourself. All right. Do not allow, very specifically, China, the country, right, to come in and be like, hey, listen, I'm gonna give you all these things, knowing that you're gonna default. They know you cannot afford the loan that they're giving you. This is, by all definitions, a debt trap. Absolutely, right? So listen, I'm gonna come and take all of your things because I gave you something I knew you couldn't pay. Aren't I a great person? I'm a terrible person. Guys, what do we do with this? You have to stop this. And what's funny is that I would say about 10 or 15 years ago when I started hearing all these things about how China was starting to basically start investing, they started investing super largely in Africa, I was like, oh no, guys, that's just going to be crazy, bro. Like nothing good will come from that. Like we've seen what they do, what they have done. I'm not referring to the people, guys. Keep this in mind. I'm not referring to the people. I'm referring to the government, guys. So anytime I start mentioning China, be fully aware I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about the government. guys, right? We have seen what they have done internationally on a large scale, guys. We have, right? We have seen this. God, guys. The only way I can again see it is if everyone just does things on their own. And again, the other video that I did today was capitalism destroying us, right? And the reason why I bring this up here is that in that video we kind of spoke about how if we can't figure out a way, right, for everyone to kind of just do things on their own, mainly, you can't yell at these developing nations for using all these like non-renewable sources to kind of, power their country. We did it. You get what I'm saying here, guys? You can't yell at them. Do they need to stop? Kinda, yeah. But who's going to help them, if that makes any sense? Who's at least give the blueprints for free, right? Make the materials super cheap so these things can be viable. But do not expect anything back in return. Don't pull a China and make all these African nations debt traps. Trap them to the point where now you need to take all of their ports, airports, all types of things that mean things to them. You'll take natural resources next. You're taking 40% of all tax money from a country? Oh, that's wild, bro. That's just come on.
Countries that were expecting to and relying on securing additional funding have found themselves cut off. A project to connect a super fast rail link between the port of Mombasa and Uganda has run out of money. In Kenya, the tracks end abruptly in the countryside, some 468 kilometers short of their destination. Strapped for cash, the country is resorting to refurbishing 19th century colonial British tracks that have laid covered by foliage for over half a century. Similar difficulties are being experienced in Cameroon and Nigeria as total funding for the continent has dropped from 11 billion to 3.3 billion, a drop of over 70% in just the last 3 years. As these countries find out the hard way that the free-flowing capital of the last decade is not a guarantee, and that China is utilizing these projects for political and economic gain, the future of the Belt and Road Initiative is now in question. In the meantime,
who were their advisors?
However, some countries like Uganda are having to pay the price.
Right. Guys, listen, so there are a couple of countries in Africa to basically look out for. And I would definitely say it's probably going to be Uganda, Botswana, Kenya. Like these places very specifically are probably going to be the next like boom towns. I'm not regarding Nigeria obviously because Nigeria is already the boom town, guys. It's the place to be, if that makes any sense, guys. Lagos, Abuja, these are absolutely dope places to encounter, guys, right? But all right, listen, let me know in the comments. So why do you think Africa would be doomed to be poor? Do you think that there's actually a way out? I'm definitely invested in knowing if you guys do think that there's a way out of the current situation that they are in, being consistently trapped by China. Let me know. But all right, listen, if you guys are new here, again, please like and subscribe, all right? And you guys all have an absolutely amazing day and enjoy your day thoroughly.